Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I wanted to do a quick kind of size comparison focused video on the mini Arius while it's here. I'm about to pack this knife back up and send it to my buddy Ryan, who was incredibly gracious and generous in loaning it to me to check out. This has been a loaner that is a collection piece for him, so I haven't carried or cut with this knife in any way. I've just kind of handled it a little bit, and it's now going right back to him. But this is a prototype of the mini Arius. If you are interested in hearing more of my first impressions about this knife itself, that's going to be in a separate video, which by the time this is live, will already be live itself. But again, while it's here, before I get it back in the box, I wanted to do a size comparison mostly with the full-size Arius, because I imagine most of the buyers who are most excited for this knife are Arius owners, or people who have owned an Arius, and maybe they let go of it because they thought it was too big. I want to show them side by side and talk about the differences. It's mostly similarities, but mostly just kind of make sure I show them side by side from each angle, and you can see visually how they look next to each other. I'm not a huge specs focused guy. If you want specs on these knives, I assume Koenig has that information, so I'm not going to be like putting rulers or measuring tape to these or calipers or anything like that. I'm just going to be showing them side by side. So I've also grabbed a couple of other knives. I don't usually do size comparisons, but I think for this one I might as well. So I have my Para 3, a PM2, and I actually grabbed my Brian Brown Jaeger M as well to hold up next to it. I haven't held that up next to it yet, but I think they're going to be comparable. So yeah, let's go ahead. I'll start with the couple that aren't the full-size Arius. We'll show a couple size comparisons, and then we'll talk about them next to each other for a little bit. So again, this was loaned to me by Ryan. His Instagram will be linked down below, and I can't thank him enough for that. It has been awesome to be able to check it out. So let's start with the Para 3. Let's see if I can find a way to hold these that makes sense. So if you look at them side by side, this Para 3 is wearing Cerberus skinny scales at the moment, so it's not the most factory original, but the dimensions in terms of overall length are factory original. You can see the Para 3, you get quite a bit more in terms of handle size, mostly because of that forward choil, but in terms of blade length, we're neck and neck there. They're very, very close. Looks to me like you're going to get a hair more cutting edge on the mini Arius than you are. Yeah, it's just a hair. It's real close. Just because the choil size is a little bit less on the mini Arius, which that choil isn't really a finger choil on the mini Arius, by the way. That's ergonomically, you're not going to catch me keeping my finger up there. So yeah, in terms of their overall lengths, the Para 3 is just a hair longer, I would say. It's real, real close, though. So if you're familiar with the Para 3, this is about Para 3 sized. It's real close. Let's put it up next to the PM2. Going to see, obviously, quite a bit smaller than a PM2. This is a River's Edge Cutlery Avocado PM2 and 204P for those who are going to ask. Yeah, I mean, the PM2 is more like the size of the standard Arius. The mini Arius is going to be quite a bit smaller. So it's nice for me knowing that this is about Para 3 sized, because for me, the way that this knife becomes justifiable, since I already love carrying the Arius as a primary, is that this is now a secondary Arius. It's like a back left pocket type of knife, which is where I typically carry my secondaries. So I love that. Let's hold it up next to the Jaeger M. So this is the Brian Brown production Jaeger M, built by Riat, of course. And you can see the mini Arius seems a little bit smaller, just a hair, mostly in blade length, actually. It looks like the handle lengths are almost identical. That's real, real close. Let's hold up this way. Yeah, so we're getting a little bit more blade length on the Jaeger. Totally different shapes, of course, as you can see, however. But yeah, these are fairly close in size. The Jaeger is one of those that I carry sometimes as a secondary, sometimes as a primary. And I think that's more so like the design of this knife than it is the size. If this knife was lighter and a little bit slimmer, I'd probably carry it more as a secondary. Let's also look at thicknesses. So if I hold these up, man, this is a little difficult. With a pair of 3, honestly, our thicknesses look pretty similar. They both feel in hand to me as well like they're about the same thickness. If I look at them naked eye, the pair of 3 maybe is a hair thicker, but because the Arius is contoured a little bit, that makes it kind of difficult to see. Let me do that with a PM2 wearing factory G10. Yeah, real close, about the same in thickness. Handle thickness is what I'm looking at. Pretty neck and neck there. So this isn't an overly thin knife, not overly thick either. Now let's take a minute to show it next to its big brother, the full-size Arius. So on the production variants of the mini Arius, you're going to see specs much more like this production one. It'll have internal lightning pockets instead of these external milled pockets. It'll be an M390 blade instead of this one, which I think is CPM 154 for the prototypes. But yeah, honestly, it's kind of like looking at a PM2 next to a pair of 3. It's a full size lower, they're like notched. About a 3.5-inch blade, about a 3-inch blade. They're right there, and I think it makes a lot of sense that it's this small, and then it's not smaller than it is, but also not bigger than it is. Because if it was closer to the size of the full-size Arius, it would be like, I don't know, why make a change if it's not dramatic enough? But if it was smaller, then you start to lose a lot of people, right? Because there have been plenty of times where right now I'm just kind of used to carrying larger knives, but for a long time I would carry a knife, not 2 knives, and about a 3-inch blade was really comfortable for me. I've spent a lot of days with just a pair of 3 in pocket. So this size is going to make a lot of people happy. While I've got them both here as well, I should mention. So for my hands, if you look at how much of the grip area I take up on a full-size Arius, there's quite a bit of handle left afterwards. I wear medium-sized gloves, but I fill them out real well. But yeah, so this, for me, that's how much handle I actually use on the Arius. Sometimes if I'm kind of choked back, I don't know. But this is a pretty standard saber grip for me. This is where I feel comfortable on the knife, and I've got a decent bit of handle left over back there. For some people who know that their hand fills up the Arius pretty well, you'll know that by looking at this, that your hand is going to probably stick off of the mini Arius, because same grip, I don't have much extra handle back here. It's really, I'm taking up just about the entire thing, but I'm not hanging off at all. So for people with hands my size, or maybe even if they're a little bit smaller than mine, they may find that this knife feels even more comfortable for them. I think of it like the Demco 80/20 versus the 20.5. For my hands, the 20.5 is actually a little bit more comfortable because the 80/20 feels a little bit like I'm stretching myself. And this feels very, very good. Also, let's compare thicknesses here, because the mini Arius certainly feels thinner to me than the standard Arius. And yeah, you can see that. It's definitely noticeably thinner. So it's going to carry smaller in pocket, not just because it's shorter, but because the entire profile got thinner as well. And yeah, that makes a big difference, at least for me, in comfort of carry. The thinness of a knife is oftentimes the biggest factor of how comfortable it's going to be in pocket. So the fact that the mini Arius got a little thinner is probably going to make it much more comfortable for a lot of people. I can't speak to that from experience yet because I haven't even slipped this into a pocket. I haven't carried it, and I'm not going to. The time will come when production is ready and I have one of my own, but there it is, side by side again. So yeah, I mean, when you look at it with the full-size Arius, let's do clip side this time. They are, it's not like one is gigantic and one is tiny. I will say the full-size Arius is on the larger end of folders for a lot of people. I've heard quite a few people say that the Arius feels a little big to them, which is fair. I think the handle especially is a little bit big on the Arius, and part of that is what makes it so comfortable to me, honestly, to actually hold and use. But the mini Arius is not a tiny knife. It is certainly a miniaturized version of the full size, but it's not like a micro knife. It's not awkwardly small. It still feels very capable. It feels super, super close to a Para 3 to me. They are very, very close in size and dimensions, and probably in use case for a lot of people. If you find that the Para 3 is a knife that works really well for you, you'll probably find that the Mini Arius is a knife that works really well for you. If you're somebody who has tried the Para 3 and the PM2, and you know you greatly prefer having the PM2, then odds are the full-size Arius is probably going to be the one that's a better size for you. But yeah, honestly, I think the Mini Arius is a great size. I was worried before it came out that it was going to be too shrunk or that the proportions wouldn't feel right with it being smaller, and that's not the case. This knife feels phenomenal in my hand. I can't wait to have one that I can carry and use. And yeah, but there it is. This is just meant to be a quick little side-by-side size comparison. I don't know if I showed them folded next to each other yet, did I? I should probably... Glad I'm doing that. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit smaller. It's a little bit thinner, and this one, it doesn't feel weight-wise like it will as a production version, so I probably won't speak to that until I have a production one. But on the prototypes, if for some reason you get a chance to get one of these, congrats to you. These feel a little bit heavier than the Arius does because they don't have internal milling like all of the current Ariuses that come with lightning pockets do. So these are extensively internally milled. The Arius is a knife to me that I describe as always feeling lighter when I pick it up than it did when I was looking at it. Like, it visually looks heavier than it actually feels. And this one doesn't have that same sensation, but that's because it doesn't have this same feature. On production, it will. This will be internally milled on the production version, so I imagine that's going to make it seem even more comfortable. It will change the balance, it'll change the acoustics compared to this prototype one, but the ergos will be the same. So anyway, yeah. I guess let's also real quick, let's show blade stock thickness. I feel like some people are going to want to know that. Looks like the Mini Arius is a hair thinner, but that might just be my eyes playing tricks on me, is it? Yeah, it's a little thinner. I haven't put calipers on it, so I don't know how much thinner, but the blade stock itself is a little thinner too, which is going to be part of why the knife itself is thinner in profile, because scale thickness is one thing, as we already looked at how thick these are, right? But the gap between the scales is determined by how thick the blade stock is, so having a thinner blade stock is going to make the scales sit closer together, so that's nice. Sweet. Anyway, let me see if I can left-handed flick that. This was just a quick size comparison. So thanks for checking it out with me, guys. Yeah, these are going right back in the box. So if you have questions after this video about the Mini Arius and they weren't answered here, I probably don't really have the answer because I won't have this knife in hand anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, talk to somebody who does have a prototype. Perfect segue for Ryan. His Instagram will be linked down below. Again, huge thank you to him for loaning this to me, and we'll see you all on the next one.